My dad said veterans should stop whining about their injuries. The words detonated in the silence like a live grenade. Ethan Miles stood in the center of Providence Municipal Court, 17 years old. Chin raised in defiance, arms crossed, like armor. He delivered the statement as if it were indisputable fact, as if everyone present should nod in agreement. Judge Frank Caprio's pen stopped mid-stroke. He looked up slowly, his weathered face unreadable, not angry, not shocked, just still, the kind of profound stillness that precedes thunder. Ethan smirked, mistaking silence for victory. He thought invoking his father's name, Congressman Richard Miles, was an impenetrable shield, a get-out-of-jail-free card. He thought power meant immunity from consequence. He had no idea what was coming, because Judge Caprio knew something Ethan didn't, something about Congressman Miles that would shatter every assumption this arrogant teenager had built his worldview upon, a secret the Congressman had been guarding for months, a truth that would wipe that smirk off Ethan's face and force him to see his father and himself in an entirely different light. The courtroom seemed to contract, every eye fixed on the bench, waiting to see what Judge Caprio would do. Tell us where you're watching from, and like this video if you love Judge Frank Caprio. Judge Caprio set his pen down with deliberate care. He folded his hands on the bench and regarded Ethan Miles with the kind of infinite patience that comes from 3 decades of watching young people self-destruct with their own words. We'll address what your father allegedly said, Judge Caprio said quietly, his voice like velvet over steel. First, let's talk about what you did. Ethan shrugged with theatrical indifference. I didn't do anything. We'll see about that. The clerk stood, adjusting her reading glasses with practiced precision. She opened the file and cleared her throat, her voice cutting through the tension. Let's begin, Judge Caprio said. Miss Lopez had been a court clerk for 15 years. She'd read thousands of charges without flinching, but even she paused fractionally before reading this one. Case number 2020-60 or 11892. She announced, City of Providence versus Ethan Miles. Charges: harassment of a disabled person, disorderly conduct, reckless scooter operation, and disrespect toward law enforcement. Ethan didn't stand. He didn't even straighten his posture. He simply rolled his eyes and sighed as if this entire proceeding were beneath him, a tedious interruption to his day. Judge Caprio's voice sliced through the room. Mr. Miles, stand. When charges are read, Ethan sighed again, louder this time, but he stood slowly as though granting everyone a magnanimous favor. Where is your parent or guardian? Judge Caprio asked. My dad's in Washington, Ethan replied with a dismissive wave. He's a congressman. He's busy with important stuff. More important than this, Ethan shrugged. He said he'd handle it later. He always does. Judge Caprio studied him for a long, uncomfortable moment. Handle it how? I don't know. Make some calls. Talk to whoever he needs to talk to. Ethan's smirk returned. It'll go away. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Judge Caprio raised one hand, and silence descended instantly. Nothing goes away in my courtroom, Mr. Miles, Judge Caprio said, each word measured and final, not because of phone calls, not because of who your father is. Ethan's smirk faltered just for a heartbeat, then returned, harder and more brittle than before. We'll see, he muttered. Court log Tuesday, 10:15 a.m., Providence Municipal Court case called. Defendant present without guardian, Judge Caprio notes. Parental absence. Judge Caprio leaned forward slightly. Do you understand the charges against you? I guess, Ethan said. You guess? I mean, yeah, but they're exaggerated. Some old guy got his feelings hurt. That's not a crime. Judge Caprio's expression remained impassive. An old guy. Yeah. He was blocking the bike path. I told him to move. He didn't. I went around him. That's it. That's your version. That's what happened. Judge Caprio nodded slowly. He retrieved a photograph from the file and held it up for the courtroom to see. It showed a wooden cane split cleanly in half, lying abandoned on a paved path. This is what happened to his cane when you went around him, Judge Caprio said. Ethan barely glanced at it. Accidents happen. Accidents. Yeah. Judge Caprio set the photo down with careful precision. Mr. Miles, do you know who you knocked into? Ethan shrugged. Some guy. Sergeant Thomas Rieck, United States Army, Purple Heart recipient. Judge Caprio's voice grew quieter, more dangerous. He lost both legs below the knee in Afghanistan. That cane you see broken in the photo, that's what keeps him balanced when his prosthetics cause him pain. The courtroom fell absolutely silent. Ethan blinked. For the first time, Genuine uncertainty flickered across his face, but it vanished in an instant, replaced by defiance. I didn't know that, he said. Would it have mattered? Judge Caprio asked. Ethan didn't answer. Ethan Miles wasn't merely disrespectful. He was calculated. Every shrug, every dismissive comment, every strategic mention of his father's position, all designed to minimize, deflect, and escape accountability. He learned early that power protected him, that names opened doors and closed cases, that rules applied to other people. He thought Judge Caprio would be like everyone else, another adult who would back down when confronted with political influence. Another obstacle he could talk his way around. My dad makes the rules here, Ethan said suddenly, his voice gaining confidence. He's on the Judiciary Oversight Committee. He knows judges. He knows how this works. Judge Caprio tilted his head. Your father makes the rules. Yeah, he does. And you think that protects you? I know it does. Judge Caprio nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving Ethan's face. Mr. Miles, let me ask you something. Do you know what your father has been doing? For the last 3 months, the question landed awkwardly. Ethan frowned, suddenly defensive. He's been working. Bills, committees, congressional stuff. Congressional stuff, Judge Caprio repeated. Yeah. Why? Judge Caprio didn't answer immediately. He simply looked at Ethan with an expression that was equal parts pity and disappointment. We'll come back to that, he said quietly. Text message exchange of number 10 for 4:47 p.m. Ethan, just knocked some old dude's cane. In-law, Marcus, dude of Fethin. He was in my way. Told him to move faster. Marcus, you're innocent, Ethan. My dad will fix it. He always does. The side door of the courtroom opened quietly. No announcement. No fanfare. Just a man walking slowly, carefully, using a prosthetic leg and a new wooden cane. Sergeant Thomas Riek was 72 years old. His hair was winter white, his face weathered by decades of service and survival, his eyes sharp and clear as mountain water. He wore a simple button-down shirt, no uniform, no medals displayed. He didn't need them. You could see what he was in the way he carried himself, the quiet dignity, the earned authority that cannot be taught or faked. He walked to the front row and lowered himself slowly into a seat, leaning his cane against the bench beside him. Ethan was looking at his phone. He didn't notice, but everyone else did. The courtroom shifted. People sat straighter. Whispers ceased. Even the clerk paused mid-notation to watch as Sergeant Riek settled into his seat and folded his hands in his lap. Judge Caprio saw him. He nodded once, a small gesture of profound respect. Sergeant Riek nodded back. Ethan finally looked up. He saw the man in the front row, saw the prosthetic leg, saw the cane. His face went pale. Who's that? He whispered. Nobody answered. Court log 1040 to AM, silence in court. Judge Caprio turned to the officer standing near the side door. Officer Mendez, your report. Please. Officer Carla Mendez stepped forward. She was in her late 30s, calm and professional, with the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it. On November 10th at approximately 4:30 p.m., she began. I responded to a complaint at Roger Williams Park. The complainant, Sergeant Thomas Riek, reported being harassed and assaulted by a minor on an electric scooter. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. Sergeant Riek was walking on the designated bike path. Officer Mendez continued. The defendant approached from behind at high speed and yelled at him to move faster. When Sergeant Riek explained he couldn't move faster due to his prosthetics, the defendant reportedly said. She paused, her jaw tightening. He said, then maybe you should stay home. A collective gasp filled the courtroom. The defendant then deliberately swerved close to Sergeant Riek. Officer Mendez continued, her voice steady, but laced with controlled anger, causing him to lose balance and fall. His cane was destroyed. His left prosthetic was damaged. He sustained bruising to his shoulder and hip. Judge Caprio closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they were fixed on Ethan. Is that accurate? Judge Caprio asked. Ethan's voice was small. I didn't mean to make him fall, but you did mean to tell him to stay home. Ethan said nothing. You looked at a decorated war hero, Judge Caprio said, his voice steady, but ice cold. And you told him he didn't belong in a public park because his injuries inconvenienced you. I didn't know he was a veteran, Ethan said quickly. Would it have mattered? Ethan opened his mouth, closed it. No answer came. Body cam audio transcript number 10 4:35 p.m. Officer Mendez, son, what's your name? Ethan Miles. Why, you can't do anything. My dad's a congressman. Officer Mendez, that doesn't give you the right to assault someone. Ethan Miles, I didn't assault anyone. The old guy fell. Not my problem. Officer Mendez, the old guy is a Purple Heart recipient. 3-second pause. Ethan Miles, whatever. Call my dad. He'll straighten this out. Judge Caprio set the transcript down. He looked at Ethan for a long moment, not with anger, but with something deeper. Sadness, perhaps, or disappointment. You keep saying your father will fix this, Judge Caprio said. You keep invoking his name like it's a magic word, like power is a shield. Ethan crossed his arms. Because it is it? Yeah, my dad knows. People, important people. He can make this go away. Judge Caprio nodded slowly. Mr. Miles, I'm going to ask you again. Do you know what your father has been doing for the last 3 months? Working, Ethan said, but his voice wavered. On what? Bills? Legislation? I don't know. He doesn't tell me everything. No, Judge Caprio said quietly. He doesn't. The side door opened again. This time, everyone turned. Congressman Richard Miles walked into the courtroom. He looked nothing like the polished politician Ethan described. His suit was wrinkled. His tie hung crooked. His face was drawn and exhausted, his eyes red-rimmed. He walked to the front slowly, like a man approaching his own execution. Your Honor, he said quietly, may I speak? Ethan's face went white. Dad, what are you doing here? Richard didn't. Look at him. He kept his eyes locked on Judge Caprio, who nodded once. Please, Judge Caprio said. Richard Miles stood at the bar, gripping it with both hands as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. He took a breath, then another. His voice shook when he spoke. My son thinks I'm powerful. He said, he thinks I can fix anything, make problems disappear, protect him from consequences. He paused, gathering himself. He doesn't know that I'm under ethics investigation. He doesn't know that I've spent the last 3 months meeting with lawyers, trying to save my career. He doesn't know that I'm terrified. I'll lose everything. Ethan stared at his father, mouth open in shock. I let him believe I was invincible, Richard continued, his voice breaking. I let him think power was the answer to everything. I taught him that being important was better than being good. He finally looked at Ethan, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry, son. I failed you. I taught you the wrong lessons, and now you're here paying for my mistakes. Subscribe if you're over 50 and love real justice. Voicemail from Congressman Miles, Chief of Staff, recorded November 3rd, 6:20 p.m. Congressman, we need to talk about the investigation. The Ethics Committee is moving forward. We're running out of time. We need to prepare for the possibility that, pause, just call me back, please. Judge Caprio let the silence sit. He didn't interrupt. He understood that some confessions needed space. Finally, he spoke. Congressman Miles. Judge Caprio said gently, your son keeps saying you make the rules, that you have power, that you can fix this. Richard wiped his eyes. I know. Can you? No, Richard said, his voice cracked and raw. I can't. Judge Caprio nodded. Then let me tell you what I know, what your son doesn't know. He opened a folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. For the last 3 months, Judge Caprio said, while you've been dealing with your investigation, you've also been volunteering every Saturday morning 6 a.m. to noon at the Providence Veterans Rehabilitation Center. Ethan's head snapped toward his father. What? You serve meals, Judge Caprio continued. You help veterans with physical therapy exercises. You sit with them. You listen to their stories. You don't tell anyone your name. You don't wear a suit. You just show up and you help. Richard was crying openly now. The staff told me, Judge Caprio said, that you're the most reliable volunteer they have, that veterans ask for you by name, that you made a real difference in their lives. He looked directly at Ethan. Your father isn't powerful, Ethan, not in the way you think, but he's good. He's trying to atone for his mistakes. He's trying to serve people who gave everything for this country. Ethan's face crumpled. Dad, I didn't tell you, Richard said, voice thick with emotion, because I was ashamed, because I thought if you knew I was struggling, you'd lose respect for me, you'd see me as weak. You're not weak, Ethan whispered. Neither are veterans. Richard said firmly, they're the strongest people I've ever met, and you mocked one of them. You hurt him. You dismissed his sacrifice. He took a shaky breath. That's on me, son, because I taught you that power matters more than people. I'm so sorry. Judge Caprio gave them a moment. Then he turned to Ethan. Double quotes Mr. Miles. He said, "Look at Sergeant Riek." Ethan turned slowly. Sergeant Riek was watching him, not with anger, not with hatred, but with something Ethan couldn't quite name. Disappointment, perhaps, or pity. Sergeant Riek lost his legs defending your freedom. Judge Caprio said, "He gave years of his life to this country. He sacrificed his body so you could grow up safe." Ethan's shoulders began to shake. "And you told him to stay home," Judge Caprio said. "You laughed at his pain. You dismissed his humanity." "I'm sorry," Ethan whispered. "Sorry isn't enough," Judge Caprio said. "Sorry is just words. You need to show it. You need to understand the weight of what you've done." He opened the file in front of him. "Here is my ruling." Judge Caprio's voice was calm and measured, but it carried the weight of finality. "Ethan Miles," he began, "you are 17 years old. You have your whole life ahead of you, but that life will be defined by the choices you make right now, today, in this courtroom." Ethan wiped his face, trying to steady himself. "You harassed a disabled veteran," Judge Caprio said. "You mocked his injuries. You caused him to fall and be hurt. That is not a youthful mistake. That is a moral failure." He paused. "But I'm going to give you a chance to learn from it." Ethan looked up, hopeful and terrified in equal measure. "Here is my sentence," Judge Caprio said. "You will complete 80 hours of community service at the Providence Veterans Rehabilitation Center. You will assist veterans with daily tasks. You will listen to their stories. You will learn their names and their sacrifices." Ethan nodded. "Quickly, okay? I will. You will write 2 letters of apology," Judge Caprio continued. "One to Sergeant Riek, one to every veteran whose service you dismiss with your words. Both handwritten, both sincere. Yes, Your Honor. You will create 2 public service announcements about respecting disabled veterans. These will be posted online and aired on local media. You will put your face and your name to them." Ethan swallowed hard. "I understand. You will pay restitution to Sergeant Riek for his damaged cane and prosthetic. $740. Yes, sir." And finally, Judge Caprio said, "You will write a 5-page reflection essay on what you learned. You will read it aloud in this courtroom in 6 months in front of Sergeant Riek, in front of your father, in front of everyone. Sentencing summer November 24. 200 to 1,580 hours community service. Providence Veterans Rehabilitation Center. Handwritten apology. Letters to public service announcements video. $740 restitution for damaged equipment. 5-page reflection essay. Read aloud in court. Follow-up hearing. May 24, 2026. Judge Caprio leaned forward. "Ethan, I'm not punishing you. I'm teaching you. I'm giving you a chance to become someone better. Someone your father can be proud of. Someone you can be proud of." He looked at Richard. "Congressman, your son needs you. Not your power. Not your connections. You, the man who shows up at 6 a.m. every Saturday to serve veterans. That's the father he needs to see." Richard nodded, unable to speak. Judge Caprio turned to Sergeant Riek. "Sergeant, do you have anything you'd like to say?" Sergeant Riek stood slowly. He looked at Ethan for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice quiet but strong. "I don't want you to feel guilty for the rest of your life," he said. "I want you to do better. That's all. Just do better." Ethan's tears came fast now. "I will, sir. I promise." Sergeant Riek nodded. Then he sat back down. Judge Caprio closed the file. "We're done here for now." The first Saturday Ethan arrived at the Veterans Rehabilitation Center at 5:50 a.m. His father drove him. Neither spoke much on the way. The silence wasn't angry. It was the tentative quiet of 2 people learning to be honest with each other. Inside, the center smelled like coffee and disinfectant. A woman with kind eyes met them at the door. "You must be Ethan," she said warmly. "I'm Clara. I run the volunteer program." "Hi," Ethan said quietly. "Thank you for letting me help." Clara smiled. "We're glad to have you. Your father speaks highly of this place." Ethan glanced at his dad. Richard gave a small, sad smile. "Follow me," Clara said. She led Ethan to a therapy room where a dozen veterans were working through exercises. Some were in wheelchairs, some used prosthetics, some had visible scars, some carried invisible ones. In the corner, working with resistance bands, was Sergeant Riek. Ethan's stomach dropped. "Sergeant," Clara said gently, "your new assistant is here." Sergeant Riek looked up. His expression was unreadable. "Hello, sir," Ethan said, his voice shaking. "I'm here to help. However you need me." Sergeant Riek studied him for a long moment. Then he held out a resistance band. "Start by handing me the blue one," he said. "And then you can tell me why you're really here." Ethan took a breath. "I'm here because I hurt you, and I was wrong, and I want to do better." Sergeant Riek nodded slowly. "Good. That's a start. Case follow-up logmark 15. 2026 Ethan Miles has completed 58 of 80 required service hours. Staff reports exceptional attitude and engagement. Sergeant Riek has personally requested Ethan continue assisting with his therapy sessions. Both PSA letters have been recorded and aired, letters delivered and accepted over the next 5 months. Ethan learned what service truly meant. He learned the names of men who'd fought in Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, and wars whose names he'd never heard. He learned about sacrifice, about pain, about resilience. He learned that Sergeant Riek had been a medic, that he'd lost his legs saving 3 wounded soldiers from a burning vehicle, that he'd spent 2 years in rehabilitation learning to walk again. "Why did you do it?" Ethan asked. One morning as they worked through exercises, Sergeant Riek paused. "Because they were my brothers, and you don't leave your brothers behind." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "I don't think I've ever cared about anyone that much." "You will," Sergeant Riek said, "when you stop thinking about what people can do for you and start thinking about what you can do for them." Ethan nodded. He was beginning to understand why his father kept volunteering, too. They worked side by side most Saturdays. They really talked about the investigation, about fear, about redemption. "I thought power was everything," Richard said one morning, as they folded towels. "I thought if I could control outcomes, I could control my life. And now," Ethan asked, "now I think service is everything. Showing up, helping, being present. That's real power." Ethan looked at his father, really looked at him, and saw someone he'd never noticed before. Not a congressman, not a political figure, just a man trying to do better. "I'm proud of you, Dad," Ethan said quietly. Richard's eyes filled with tears. "I'm proud of you, too, son." May the 4th day arrived cool and overcast. The courtroom was packed. Claire came. Sergeant Riek came, walking confidently with his new cane. A dozen veterans from the center filled the back rows, quiet and dignified. Judge Caprio entered, and everyone stood. "Please sit," he said. He looked at Ethan. The boy looked different, older not in years, but in bearing. He stood straight, made eye contact, didn't look away. "Ethan Miles," Judge Caprio said, "you've completed your service hours. You've delivered your apologies. You've paid restitution. You've created your PSA letters. Now, I'd like to hear your essay." Ethan nodded. He pulled out 5 handwritten pages and walked to the podium. He took a breath. "6 months ago," he began, voice steady, "I stood in this courtroom and told Judge Caprio that my father made the rules. That power protected me. That veterans should stop whining." He paused. "I was wrong about everything." For the next 10 minutes, Ethan read. He talked about what he'd learned, about Sergeant Riek's courage, about his father's humility, about service and sacrifice, and the difference between power and strength. When he finished, the courtroom was silent. Then Sergeant Riek started clapping slowly, deliberately. The other veterans joined. Then everyone else. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." Judge Caprio smiled. "Well done, Mr. Miles. This case is officially closed." Ethan walked over to Sergeant Riek. He extended his hand. "Thank you, sir," Ethan said, "for teaching me, for giving me a chance." Sergeant Riek shook his hand firmly. "You earned it, son. Keep going." Richard Miles approached Judge Caprio. "Thank you, Your Honor, for seeing him, for seeing us." Judge Caprio nodded. "Take care of each other and keep showing up on Saturdays." Richard smiled. "We will." Outside, the sun was breaking through the clouds. Ethan and his father walked together toward the parking lot. Behind them, Sergeant Riek and the other veterans followed, talking quietly among themselves. "Dad," Ethan said, "yeah, I want to keep volunteering, even though I'm done." Richard stopped walking. He looked at his son, and for the first time in months, he smiled without sadness behind it. "I like that," he said. "We'll do it together." They kept walking side by side toward whatever came next. And in the courtroom behind them, Judge Frank Caprio watched them go. He thought about fathers and sons, about power and service, about the moments that break us and the choices that remake us. He thought about justice. Real justice, the kind that doesn't just punish, the kind that transforms. Like this video if you miss Judge Caprio.